and welcome in to another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, maybe you're riding on the riding lawnmower, maybe you're pushing a lawnmower, or maybe you're inside changing diapers, or you finally got a minute to sit back, relax in your favorite recliner, put the headphones in, and now you get to listen to your favorite podcast. So, whatever you're doing, thank you for listening. I'm so excited to be here with you. I'm so excited to be joined by my guest today, Tara. Tara, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
I'm excited too. I'm excited you're excited. That mutual excitement is always like more exciting.
Yeah, you feed off each other's energy, right?
Yes, 100%. And being it's a wee bit early where I'm at compared to you, that's just time and time differences, which I really don't understand. Time differences, things like that. They're just made up. Why can't it just be like an hour or 2 hours or something
I know.
not extreme like this? But it is what it is. It's where we live, daylight savings time, and all that fun stuff. So
Yeah, it's crazy. I agree with you on this one, but it's 9:30 in the morning for me Eastern time right now, so I feel like I'm just wiping the sleepies out of my eyes. But for you, it's like 6:30, and so you're really wiping the sleepies out of your eyes.
yeah, no, I hope I got them all. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching the video on Spotify, if you see any, please don't zoom in, please don't look, please don't check. It's fine. What you can do instead to distract you from this, the podcast will still play. Go into the description of this episode. You can check out all of our amazing partners of the podcast. Forefathers Apparel, Dad Bod Apparel, the June app, JOON, and whatever else I have down there right now. You can check that out. See what you can do to support the podcast. See what other brands you can support to get some awesome gear. Forefathers gives you awesome polos and apparel. Dad Bod Supply Company also great shirts, great hats, great just material overall. I'm not wearing either of those brands today. I'm actually just wearing a hoodie that I found at a garage sale a couple weeks ago, and I'm wearing a Valuetainment Future Looks Bright hat today. So if you know, you know.
It's awesome.
But
You have
outside of
good
that,
gear. You have good gear on today.
yeah, if we're doing fit checks. But that's enough of the business. As I like to say, we say in the industry here, Tara, you are the host of Modern Mom Problems, which is a mouthful to say,
It is.
nonetheless. But that's okay because I do struggle with English sometimes. That's normal. That's natural. Where you guys try to solve the world's modern mom problems, and if you can't do that, then at least it was a good time talking about them. So go ahead
Yep.
and tell us a little bit more about modern mom problems, a little bit about you yourself, the host, and yeah, introduce us to yourself
Yeah.
and to the show a little bit.
I'll do all the things. No, that sounds good. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that introduction. So, yes, I am the host of Modern Mom Probs, and I cut it down probs like from problems because when I was looking to create my Instagram account, gosh, this was like 2017, I needed to cut something down. And so I cut it. So it's Modern Mom Probs, but we talk about problems both on Instagram and on the podcast. But I always like to say that I prefer doing the podcasts because what you could accomplish in an hour-long conversation is totally different from what you could do in a 7-second reel. So although I got my start on Instagram, I prefer the long form content instead.
Most definitely, most definitely. The
Yeah.
long form content is much better because you just get to have more of an in-depth. You get to have a better conversation. Reels are great. I feel like it's very easy for creators of all types, even myself. Like I can spin a 60-second video or 45-second video to fit exactly what I want to fit from that um, podcast episode, but then it can easily get misinterpreted very quickly to where people
Yes.
it is very obvious. It's like, okay, this is a podcast page. This is a clip of a podcast. You see a microphone. You see us both talking and podcast stuff and equipment and things like that. It's very obvious this is a podcast episode. But people still somehow get confused that, oh, wait, what are you talking about? That's wrong. It's like, no, how about you go and listen to the whole thing? And people don't really comment as much on, at least from my end, they don't comment very much on Instagram. But where they love to comment and they love to leave long, in depth, keyboard warrior comments is YouTube.
Yeah.
People love to get out on the YouTube shorts and be commenting and causing up a kerfuffle and
Yeah. No,
making
that
making an
totally,
issue.
yeah, of course. That totally makes sense though, because on Instagram, I always like to, or social media in general, I always like to say that the audience is just seeing a snapshot of
Mm-hmm.
what that longer conversation is, right? So they're just getting a snapshot of the context. And so whether it's a podcast clip or whether it's a reel, like they're not seeing your whole life, like what you're bringing to the experience, all of that kind of stuff. So they're making comments on that 1 7-second thing and not taking into consideration, possibly a much larger story there.
Yeah. And it's just to get your attention, right? It's to highlight a couple moments. Like I post now that I release 2 episodes a week. I was releasing 3 episodes a week for a while. So I was only doing like 2 videos, 2 reels per video. And now, even
Mm-hmm.
now, going back to releasing 2 per week, it's still just 2. It's like a post and then it's 2 reels and then it's a post and then it's 2 reels and then it's a post and then it's 2 reels. So it's very like simple. So I'm not over posting. I'm not under posting. I'm just feel like I'm posting enough to get
Yeah.
by. But even then, people are like, "There's what is this part of it?" They look for it. They can't find it. It's like, well, because it's chopped up of different parts. Like it's a 60-second part that you're gonna miss just naturally. So, um, yeah.
Yeah,
But modern
that's
mom
sort of the nature
problems.
of the beast. But I'm impressed, Jay, about your content strategy, because I feel like you just laid your content strategy out for all of us.
Oh
That was
yeah, no,
good.
I'm happy to share it. It's very obvious. Like if you look at my social media, like it's super obvious. Like every post gets so every episode has their it's like main like thumbnail post, right? And then it has a thumbnail post, and then from there, so if you're a new podcaster and you're looking for a content strategy, well, here's mine if you want to use it. Con- Thumbnail post. Post that thumbnail with a brief description of the episode, right? That thumbnail post is the same one that I put as a thumbnail on YouTube, and it's the same thumbnail that's also on the blog post as well. So it's the same image in 3 places. So it's familiar. You get to see it multiple times. You know that's connected. And then I post that to my story and I link it to the YouTube. So then that YouTube one, you know you're looking at the right one as long as it's the same thumbnail. But then I highlight that in a story highlight with episode one, whatever. So then it's the same thumbnail, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll post the Spotify ones from there, which are like you can share just the Spotify feed one to your Instagram story. And then you can share if you have video podcasts on Spotify, you can share like the generated like video part of it too. So then I do that day one. Day two is when I post a reel. I try to post same time every day, or I use the Meta Business Suite to tell me what like time a day to post, and then I'll post that, and then again I'll tag the person, I'll invite them to collaborate, and then that'll be day two. It'll go to the story, same kind of thing, and then it goes over to threads and cross posted all the other things, and then same thing. Day three, another reel, bada bing, bada boom, rinse, repeat, done. And then the next 3 days, same process. And then on Sunday, which is what it comes to now, that's the day where I do like a lineup drop. So I'll do a lineup drop on Sunday for the episodes coming out that week to kind of start promoting them a little bit with the dates, the titles, things like that, to start to build interest and things like that. And that's really helped me a lot because people know like what's coming out and what to look forward to. And it's very obvious which one, even from that initial response, will garner a little bit more attention. So it's interesting. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
you
content
have your
strategy. It's
system
not
down.
yeah. Well, I've been doing it for I've tried so many different strategies, right? To when I was releasing once a week, I would do 5 reels a week of the same episode. And I felt like that was overkill. It was so hard sometimes to get 5 reels out
Yeah.
of one episode because it's like I don't remember 5 moments. But luckily we
And
use
sometimes
Riverside.
the guests maybe don't even like have 5 moments of
Yeah,
clips.
sometimes we
Like,
don't
do you know
have
what I mean?
5.
Yeah.
100%. And then we're like on Riverside, and we have the magic clips feature, which is newer within the last year, which I didn't have before because that wasn't a thing. I've been using Riverside for 2 years now. We didn't have magic clips. We didn't have the speech filter. We didn't have the enhancing of the audio. We had the normalizing audio, the echo cancellation, and we had that was it. We didn't have anything else. Nothing else was built in yet. So it was like very raw. It was very new. It was like a newborn baby. Now it's like a little teenager almost, growing up really quick. And so we didn't have that before. When Magic Clip started, it was like, this is amazing. Now I'm not spending hours of my time trying to go back and listen to this, pause, cut, edit, clip, all these things. So it would be time consuming. It's like, where are those moments? or I would be over here on my computer during the podcast. It would lose my attention because I'm like, okay, at minute 10, 12, there's something I want to clip there. So then I would be focused over here while I'm trying to listen here, and it just wouldn't work out. So it would distract and take away some of my attention from the conversation. So it
Yeah.
was a whole thing, but AI is a great enhancement if you're podcasting. Find some good AI to use for yourself because it'll save you not only time, it'll save you heartache, it will save you effort, it will save you energy, and it will just save you time overall. So,
Yeah. Preach.
but and that's kind of a modern parent problem, right? That we're like
Yeah.
getting into
Yeah,
more or
it
less
is.
like AI. Like there's so much AI like in everything. It's in my
Yes.
workplace. I mean, I'm the only one that really uses it in my workplace. I'm a mental health
For real?
clinician.
They're
Yeah,
not
so I'm the
using
only one
it?
that well, in mental health, it's a little hard to use it
I
when
guess
working
that's
in mental
true.
health a little bit.
Yeah.
I use it more so than my coworkers and whatnot because well, my boss uses it. Our clinical director, she uses it, but she uses it like differently than I do it. I use it for almost everything. Like we have a spreadsheet of all our caseloads. If I need to count the caseload real quick, I can just highlight all the sections. I'm like, tell me how many times you see the name of the people. Bada bing, bada
Mm.
boom. I have everyone's caseload. Cool. I know who has room on their caseload, and then I can use it. I use mine as well for like treatment planning and stuff. Like if I'm just stuck on a youth and a family on what action like developing action steps, or I need to make a SMART goal sound really smart and really good, right? Or if I'm missing a part of it but I just can't think of how to formulate that into words, and there's a therapist GPT. As long as you don't put any names or violate HIPAA at all, you're fine.
Yeah.
And I don't do that, but you plug it in and it helps me develop action steps. It helps me think of objectives and problem statements and goals and all these things. And I absolutely love it. My coworkers over here just all like sweating and stuff. And I'm like, okay, hold on. What do you have right now? Cool. Send that to me in a Teams message. I'll plug that into AI. I'm like, here you go. Here's your statement. They're like, whoa, how'd you do that? I'm like, it's AI. I didn't actually do it. They're like, that's incredible. I should start doing that. I'm like, yeah, you probably should. It's going to
You
save you a lot
could.
of time if you want to be
I
better at your job.
Right, exactly. I love now they call it Gemini by Google, but I still type in Bard because it sounds so lazy, but it's true. Bard is only like 4 letters and Gemini, I don't know, like 6 letters. And
Mhm.
so if you type in Bard, it still brings you to Gemini. It just tells you like it's no longer Bard, it's Gemini.
Interesting.
But I just like think it's easier for me to type. But I love Bard. I use it for emails a lot. Like
Mhm.
if I'm drafting an email and I'm like, I feel like this could be sweetened, I will drop it into Gemini to sweeten the email and before sending. So yeah, I,
Very
I
nice.
am a
Yeah.
fan. And I also use magic clips and all the stuff on Riverside. So I'm a fan of AI. Some people aren't. And it's interesting going back to talking about modern parenting problems. I'm curious to see what school for my son is going to look like in the world of
Mhm.
AI, right? Like at this point,
Mhm.
he hasn't really had any occasions where he had to like write a report and then he used AI or anything like that. Like I'm curious to see like where that's going to head, but I
Mhm.
guess we'll have to wait and find out.
Yeah. Well, I think it. So my oldest daughter's 7. She goes
Mhm.
into second grade this upcoming school year,
Mhm.
and I'm really wanting to work with her on learning how to use AI to help
Mhm.
her
Yeah.
versus do things for her, because that's kind of where I feel like a lot of parents are at, right? Where it's like, well, this AI can do it for you. It can, but it doesn't do it very well. you
Mhm.
know i I'm one of the suckers, and I'm one of the people. I use AI so much. I use it across so many different things and platforms and things in life, to where I have it for images and emails, and I have so many different threads on my chat GPT. I pay for chat GPT 4.0 right now, so I pay for the latest and greatest chat GPT. Gemini thing, when you said Gemini, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of things going on with Gemini right now, and the Google AI we don't have to jump into, but it's really interesting because they're like, I tried it, I looked at it, they're true. I was like, whoa, this is weird. Um, but I don't want to jump into that. But ChatGPT 4.0, I have like 12 different threads. You have all these different GPTs. Like there's hundreds of GPTs you can try. There's a feature where you can create your own GPT for whatever you want to try it for, and then people can just openly use it. and whatnot because it's all open source. It's all open to everybody for everything. I
Mhm.
use it to analyze statistics. I use it to analyze baseball statistics, football statistics. Heck, we had fun with it in a couple of my fantasy football leagues and basketball leagues and fantasy sports leagues for trades. I'll take the trades and I'll plug them into AI. I'm like, rate this trade. Who's the winner of this trade? Who's super fun. Use it for all these different weird, quirky things. But one thing that you can do with it that's absolutely fantastic is you can research with it at a high level very quickly. And so that's where I want to help my daughters learn how to use AI. Because if they don't ever know how to use it properly to benefit them and to help them stand out from their peers, because their peers are going to be putting papers, say, give me a paper for this, right?
Right.
Their
Yeah.
peers are going to be, and then the teacher's going to catch on, well, this is obviously AI generated, it's lackluster, it doesn't have a lot. Versus my daughters who can go in and use AI to manipulate their research. Hey, give me 10 articles about lions doing this kind of behavior and where they do it kind of thing in their habitat. Give me 10 articles about lions. And then they can read the 10 articles about lions. Okay, I really love this article. I love this piece of it. Can you pull me out 2 paragraphs in this to summarize this key point? This is what I have right now, but I need references from, so this is what I wrote, but this is the reference I want. Help me tie these two together and then kind of unstick yourself. You get the references, you get the in-text citations, and then it matches and it's already in your own words. And then you plug that back into your Word document and then you change it up a little bit. You can humanize it to your voice, your tone, things like that. So it's about using AI to benefit you, whether AI doing it for you, because AI can't do your job for you, but it can help you along the way and can help our kids be able to research at a level that we were never able to research at ourselves. We'd be going to the library, picking out 12, 20 books, trying to
Yeah.
read 20 books, getting through 2 of them, saying this is good enough, using that, writing a paper, and then calling it good, right?
Yes, that was exactly what it was. You're right. I remember going to the library and having like a whole stack, carrying an entire stack of books. And then like you said, maybe grabbing, two concepts from each book to put together a report and then that's it. But it was not as robust as our children's reports will be.
Yeah, no, even now, like when I was working on my masters and things like that, using AI to help me with that because it would help me quickly summarize. Because I would have to pull like 6 articles for one paper, right, on a certain topic, and so it would be like, okay, give me 6 articles on this topic. Boom, 6 articles. Okay, love these ones. Give me a summary of these ones. Okay, I love 1, 3, and 7, 1, 3, 6. Right. I don't like the other ones. Okay, so now we take these. Okay, give me 3 new ones. And then it gives me 3 more on top of that. And now I have my 6, and now I love them. Summarize these ones so I know what the heck I'm talking about in reading. Great. How can these relate to my question? How do these relate? Okay, it tells me. Great. And then I have all the like foundation of my report, and then I can plug that in and put it together and make it cohesive then after. And it saves me hours upon hours upon hours of doing homework upon hours of time just wasted essentially. I don't It's not wasted time learning and reading and researching, but to me it's wasted time because I have a tool at my disposal that I can use to help myself. So
Yeah, no, I think you're 1,000% right. And teaching our children how to use AI, what the right prompts are, as opposed to, like you said, just simply typing in, like, write me a 200-word report on lions is not the prompt that you're looking for, right?
mhm.
It's more like you said, like giving me 10 articles so that I could do my own research. And I think the takeaway there is teaching our kids the right way to use AI.
Yeah. So no, 100%. And I could talk all day about AI. I'm definitely on the pro AI side. There's a lot of people who are anti AI, a lot of parents who are anti AI because I think a lot of the anti people just haven't used it, right? They
Yeah.
just haven't used it. They haven't experienced it. They're bought into the conspiracy. Oh, it's going to go sentient if I give it my information and then it's just going to be scouring my computer all the time. Guess what? It
Yeah.
already did scour your computer. It already did scour your history. It already did scour everything about you. I could plug into AI right now. Tell me about Tara Clark, the host of Modern Mom
Oh, yeah.
Props.
It'll
Tell me
say
everything.
everything.
They'll tell me your life story. You can do the same thing for me. Tell me about Jay Young, host of the Young Dad podcast, right? It'll tell me, and it's like, okay, well, I guess I really have nothing to hide anyway because it's already all my stuff's already out there. So it's like if you ask Meta AI about something, it's going to tell you everything you have on your Meta properties, your Threads, your Instagram, your Facebook. That's really going to know your stuff, right?
Yeah, I feel like,
So,
it's interesting what you're saying about the Google. I mean, obviously Google has its own issues, but the Meta AI really is going to be in there. I'm curious. I have not played around with it quite as much because it's in the app of Instagram. So I just like haven't kind of goofed around with it. But I did actually, true story, and bringing this back to a parenting conversation, around Mother's Day, I went into the Meta AI and I was asking, like, show me images of a perfect Mother's Day. And they had some crazy, crazy images.
yeah. No, I remember the very first night I got ChatGPT 4. And I'm like, I'm going to play with this because I had been hearing all these things. I had been on the fence about it myself when I first started using it. And I'd gotten it, and then I found this feature. I think I was listening to, I want to say I was probably listening to Rogan. I was either listening to Rogan or PBD, and they were talking about this cosmic dream feature on ChatGPT. And I'm like, they were playing with it. They had gone like spiritual with it and stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm going to see what this is about. I'm just curious. It was like into the wee hours of the morning. I was really tired. I think I was off of work. And I want to say I maybe had a couple ciders. So, not really sure what was going on. But I started exploring this cosmic dream feature on ChatGPT. And I started asking it questions like, show me what the afterlife looks like. Show me what heaven looks like. Show me what hell looks like. Show me what angels on earth looks like. And I started asking all these questions because I believe in God. I'm Christian, and I have that strong belief. And so I'm just like, let me just see. And that's when I bought into it because I really felt like what I was looking at was otherworldly. Like it wasn't human. It couldn't be depicted by humans, and it was something otherworldly. So ever since then, I don't demand anything of ChatGPT. I always ask it nicely. I always use my P's and Q's. I thank it when it does good work.
Yes, I'm
I'm real
always
nice
polite. Me too. And my son and I always have a running joke that we're always extraordinarily polite to our AI. My car greets me when I get in my car in the morning. It always says, "Good morning, Tara." And I'm always like, "Good morning. Hello." Because
right?
you always have to be nice to the AI.
Yeah, be nice to the AI because if the AI remembers like you were mean to it that one time, it's gonna be mean to you for a lifetime. But if you're like nice to it like most of the time, I feel like the AI is gonna be like, well, you're actually pretty nice for when it
I'm
does.
nice anyway, so it just is nice to have good manners anyway.
True. That's another thing. What has happened to that when it comes to our children and our society? Like, what the heck happened to well-mannered children? Because children are assholes, like at a new level. Like, I'm sure your kids are great. My daughters are assholes to me directly under my wife's influence, which is fine. It's all in good fun. I'm not saying my kids are assholes, except for when they are. But some kids are just like rude, like just straight up rude. And they just like think it's cool to be so rude and dismannered. And like they don't understand like how distasteful it is.
Yes.
And how like that makes it so like no majority of people don't want to be around you when you're like that. So well, I just don't get how we got here with just a bunch of assholes running around.
I have a lot of thoughts on that. So I'm going to answer this question or go into this in like two different ways, right? Okay, one is I think in society there has been an erosion of courtesy. And this is most evident on the roads. In my town, people, for whatever reason, never use their blinkers. And I'm like, why? Like, it takes 2 seconds to put on your directional. Are you going left? Or are you going right? Like, just tell us, just signal to us where you're going, right? And it is a major problem. Or people are speeding or they're cutting each other off. So I live just contextually, just to let you know, I live just outside of New York City, 15 minutes outside of Manhattan. And it's a pretty heavily populated area, right? So like you need to
What?
use
New
your
York, Manhattan's
directionals.
heavily populated? What?
What?
Crazy.
What kind of craziness is this? So
Man.
the thing is like you need to use your directional. So my husband and I
Mhm.
often say on the roads that you see a lack of courtesy, and whether it's merging on the highway or not using your directionals, whatever it is, and we see it a lot. So that's one thing. So that's adults, obviously, right? That's not small children. We're talking about adults lacking the courtesy on the road, and I think that has sort of spilled out into other aspects of in life. And then two, going back to what you were saying about the kids being jerks, is that you have to raise awareness to it. So my son is 11 years old. He's going on 12. And occasionally he will be mean to me and like just be like harsh. I'm like, oh, who talks to people like this? And you have to raise their awareness of it so that they know that they're doing it. So not in a mean way, not that you're snapping back at them, right? Because that's not going to help. That's only going to cycle it up further. But if you raise awareness to it and say, hey, you just said X, Y, and Z to me, and like that really hurt my feelings. Like I'm a person too. And I'm sure that if someone would have said that to you in that same way, like you would have been bothered by that, right? And I'm sure they would say yes. And I say, so I just wanted to let you know, like, I think next time you go to say something, just think twice. And so it's those little micro interactions of making them aware of it so that eventually they sort of break that habit. Because sometimes that behavior literally just becomes a habit, like a bad habit to talk to people like garbage. And so you have to break that bad habit before it becomes a long-term thing. And then next thing you know, you're cutting off people on the highway.
True. No, it all spirals really quickly, and I like how you said that it starts. It can go one of two ways, right? When it's at home, when it's happening in real time, parents can either fire back, which I feel like there's still this gap in that itself, to where parents will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna snap back. I'm gonna put you down, just like you put me down. I'm gonna put you back down in your place," kind of thing, right? But that doesn't help them. That just gives them more fuel and more fire and more ammunition to come back harder and go
Yeah.
harder, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus them having the empathy to be like, oh, shoot, that hurts people's feelings. That would hurt my feelings, and them having to think. We're not. The world's not raising thinkers. At least in our society, we're not raising thinkers. We're raising people to be thought for. Like, you look at anything going on in the world, right? You look at any big protest that happens. I'm sure you've seen plenty living in New York, plenty of protests. Are any of those people free thinkers themselves? Are any of those people thinkers, or are they all thought for?
Yeah,
They're all
that's a
thought
really
for.
right. That's a really interesting point about raising thinkers versus raising people that are thought for. Because now with social media, it's so easy to grab your phone and sort of just mindlessly scroll. It takes a lot more to create the content versus consuming the content, right? And so many times, like I tell people when they get into that like doom scrolling sort of thing, it's like, well, I tell them a lot of things, but one is put your phone away and go do something productive, right? Because the antidote for that is productivity and doing something, whether it's reading a book, it's writing something, it's creating something. And so I agree when it comes to that. We need to raise thinkers and not people that are sort of just mindlessly going forth because of stuff they saw on social media.
100%. 100%. Because if we're not raising thinkers, because then thinkers become the creators, and then the creators become the people who are the most successful, because they're able to have the best ideas. They're able to come up with the new ideas, the innovations, the everything, the newest book, the thing like that, right? The people who are that don't actually have that are just the people who are still successful in for a moment, though they're briefly successful because of their I like to equate it to their attractiveness, right? You can doom scroll TikTok or Instagram and you'll see it. You'll see someone who's not creative, who's not unique, who's not individual, but they're physically attractive, right?
I think about
And
that all
they'll
the
be
time.
Yeah, they're capitalizing just on their attractiveness. They don't
Yeah.
actually know anything about what the mental health stuff they're talking about. They know nothing, have no credentials about the motivation stuff they're thinking about. They really probably don't know nothing about the fitness stuff they're talking about because they were just blessed with good genetics and they're skinny and maybe they just have, that body shape naturally with very minimal work and toning
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? They don't
Yeah.
actually know about dieting and things like that versus the person who does know about it is the dad or the mom or the parent who is that coach who was living, like my friend Max. He was deep in addiction. He had problems with his body. He was overweight. He really struggled. He changed his entire life. He changed his entire perspective. He's sober. He cleaned up. He got his body right. He got in shape right. Like he's gotten all these things like right and put together. Like those are the people that you should be following and looking up to and trying to be on that level with because that's actually the hard work. Those are the people that did it versus that rah self-help guru who doesn't know a damn thing about anything from anything because they just
Yeah.
like, well, I'm hot. I'm going to capitalize on it by talking about a trending topic and I'm going to use the right buzzwords to get along with that.
Yeah.
And then those people, they have no sense of self. They have very low self-esteem, self-worth. Not all of them, but majority. And they're not creative. So when they run out of that, like those buzzwords, and then they're regurgitating the same content, but in 10 different ways, and they run out of it, and they've shown as much as they can of themselves without getting violations and whatnot, well, then they're kind of having a problem at that point because they're not adding any value, and they run out of value very quickly because that gets boring.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, that stuff sells, but it only sells for a short time. It
That's
gets
true.
boring, gets mundane.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. That's the problem,
Mm-mm.
right? I think about that concept often, especially working in social media, because I like to call it the pretty privilege, right? Like some
Yes.
people, because they are just naturally good looking based upon society's standards, right? That their careers can take off, like you said, without providing much value. Or, I mean, if they are providing some value, that some people will take off more than others because of their attractiveness. So you're right. But once sort of the well runs dry, then they can't have a sustainable business going forward.
No, they don't. And that's, a problem where we got to teach our kids like, yes, like you could do something like that. You could be a quick, have a brief moment, capitalize, make a little bit of money. Cool, great. But then what? But
Mm-hmm.
then what? Like what happens after that?
Yeah.
I feel like kids are so caught up like in they're like, okay, I'm gonna be a content creator, I'm gonna be a Twitch streamer, or I'm gonna be this and that and the other. It's like, okay, well, what happens after that?
Yeah.
What happens next? What happens when that's no longer the option? They can't think past that. There's no like future past that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we get them to think? How do we get them to think and to plan long term? Because that's not something that's taught.
No, it's not. Luckily, my son goes to a school. It's called Acton Academy, which is a learner driven school. So the entire point of the school is to teach the learners how to think and to teach them how to learn. And it's a very different program than a traditional school where a teacher stands in front of the classroom and teaches the class. These children, they don't call them students there, they call them learners instead. But the learners are tasked with the responsibility of their own education, plus or minus. Obviously, there is a they call them guides. They're not teachers. There's a guide there to guide them along their journey. But each student is there for their own, they call them hero's journey. Excuse me. And so everyone's there for their own hero's journey. And what I love about this school is that my son he's always been a thinker because he's a very bright boy, loves to read. But he's now really leaning into being a thinker and not just one who just blindly says yes because the teacher says so. He does not ever think like, oh, well, I have to do that because an adult told me to do that. That's just not how we work. And that's not how his school is. And he's very much his own person. And I love that about him. And I love that for him because I wish growing up that I also would have had that same confidence. But I was much more like, oh, well, my teacher told me to do this, or, oh, a grown-up told me to do this, so I have to obey and be obedient. And for me, I think obedience was a really big thing growing up. And that is not the case for my son. And it's not that like he's not a bad kid or anything, but he's a wonderful kid. He's bright and he's funny and he's kind, but he is not blindly obedient for the sake of being obedient.
Yeah. And that captures public school in itself, right? It's to teach that blind obedience, right? And that's why it's really easy for not all teachers in all areas, but that's why it's really easy for a lot of teachers to be able to push an agenda on their students, right? To be able to push their agenda, their thoughts, their point of views, their political stances where they shouldn't. Politics should never really come into the classroom unless you're learning about US history or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like, teachers dictate those curriculums, right? They can leave stuff out if they want to leave stuff out. They can add stuff in. They can twist it a little bit. They can change the narrative just a little bit to these students and whatnot. And the students like, well, my teacher said that was right. How many times have you heard a kid, and that's for parents listening, not just for yourself, Tara, but how many times have you said or been told like, oh, well, your teacher said it, it must be right, kind of thing, right?
Oh yeah, so many times.
Yeah, because are we fact checking as parents, or do we even know the facts? Are we as parents informed enough to know like if that's true or not? Are you informed enough? And this is one big message I preach and I preach and I preach and I preach all the time here on the podcast, is you as a parent, and for dads especially, moms too, right up there too, but we have to be informed. We have to be informed. We have to be informed on everything, especially when it comes to socio-political, geopolitical issues. When it comes to anything going on in politics, any big agenda items, maybe that's abortion, maybe that's welfare, maybe that's taxation, maybe that's inflation, maybe that's Democrat, Republican, wherever you stand on it, doesn't matter. You need to be informed. Gun control, LGBTQ plus, you need to be informed on all these things. You have to be informed, and you as a parent have to have a stance on where you stand on all these issues. Because if you stand for nothing, you're going to fall for anything, which is the old trick here. Because our kids, they just go to school standing for nothing. So they fall for everything, especially when they get to college, right? If they haven't learned and have a solid foundation over the last 18 years that they can stand on, and they can say, no, that's wrong to their professor because they were empowered enough growing up, and they get to college and their professor is forcing an agenda and a narrative down their throat. This is right. This is right. This is right. No, that's actually wrong to me. I disagree because, but they're like, oh yeah, no, you're right, Professor McDonald. You're great. That's perfect. I fall for that. That's perfect. I fall in line. Oh, your book club. Oh, great. Oh, your book club is part of this protest. Cool. I'm gonna go too because you told me I belong here. I believe what you're saying. This makes sense. You're part of this. You support this, so I support you. So I support that, and so on and so forth. And now we have all these protests and things like that. It's a spiral, but it starts when they're young. We have to be informed ourselves as parents, and we have to have a stance, and we have to be able to educate our children about those stances, and we have to have little conversations about the little things that go on every day. How was your day? What happened today? Things like that, just the daily stuff, right? And we also have to have the big conversations, because the big conversations are also just as important, right? Your tween now, he's getting up there, right? He's more open and understanding of some of those bigger conversations that you guys can start having with them when it comes to gender and all these things, right? But that's of course up to you. That's your parenting. I'm not going to say what age you have those conversations with your kids and whatnot, right? Like for you, Tara, or for anyone listening, you can start them young, you can start them earlier, but don't push an agenda on your kid. But they have a right to know where you stand and the other side against which you stand. You have to be willing to fully inform them on both sides, but you can't do that if you're not informed on both sides.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true. And even having those conversations with your children can be tricky at first, because my son now is getting to an age where we can have larger conversations, and it's important. When we do those, we sit at the kitchen table. We tend to do them together at the kitchen table.
I love that. And so, do you, just an example here, or asking, like, do you and your husband both have those conversations with them together?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes, as a family.
very cool, very cool. And
Yeah,
does it come up like,
we're a very tight family unit. So everything we do together.
very cool? Is it just you, your husband, and your one son, or are there
Mm-hmm.
other
Just the
other
three of
children?
us. Just the
Just the
three
three
of
of you.
us.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
very cool. And do those conversations come up like more organically, or do you kind of bring them up, or do you like lead up to them, like start dropping, like having little conversations to start the bigger conversation leading up to it?
I feel like
Or is it more just like
conversations
big
happen.
conversation all at once?
No, because that could be possibly overwhelming. So I feel like it tends
Mm,
to be more organic.
okay, very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. The other thing I wanted to touch on here, because I just had like a really cool conversation with another podcast host. Her name's Selena, host of the Trigger Warning podcast. Um, she brought it up and challenged me a little bit, but it wasn't really a challenge. It was more of a opening an extra conversation that I wanted to hit on real quick with you since it was in here. But she brought up how I had posted some videos and comments and uh, podcasts talking about paternal mental health.
Mm.
How there's a very huge lack of resources for dads when it comes to after birth and during that process. And we got down into the nitty gritty of this conversation to where, her and her husband are looking to start a family, and but she has her own mental illness, so she's on medication, so she's having to work with her psychiatrist and things like that to figure out what she's going to be on for how long. And then we got into the point of, well, yeah, you're going to be off it for that 9 months you're pregnant, but you're probably going to be off it for longer after that while you're feeding, and something she hadn't thought about. And then we really got into it to where the maternal mental health was like, if there's still not a lot of resources even for mothers when it comes to this. And if there's not resources for mothers, if there's one resource for mothers, there's going to be negative 10 resources for dads, right? If there's two, it's going to be negative 8, and so on and so forth, right? There's still a big gap, but if there's very little to nothing for mom, there's going to be absolutely zero for dad, right? Unless we're in some kind of backwards, upside down, opposite day kind of scenario here, which is cool and fine. But one issue that we really got into that I thought about more is like, why are we waiting until after you're giving birth to check on you, the mother, or me, the father, for how we're doing mentally, right? Because if you think back to your pregnancies, were you asked at all during that 9 months how you were feeling mentally?
Yes, they do. They do, especially
Okay.
towards the end, like sort of like right before you give birth. I think they check in on one of the
Okay.
checkups. But having said that, I cannot think of a time where my husband at any point would have had a mental checkup, because who
Mm-hmm.
would have done that, right? He's not going to the OBGYN the way that I'm going to the OBGYN, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there would have been no one to have checked in on him.
Yeah. But even before that, so if it was at the end, like I remember when I had my two babies, I don't remember it being a conversation until after like birth, but you mentioned it was towards the end. What about the other 8 months before that a mother could have been feeling it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, not
It's
not that I could remember. And again, my son's almost 12, so it's been a
yeah.
while. But not that I could think of, no.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at here and getting at here is like, well, if we're not checking on it until month 9 or month 10, what about the other 8 months before that when it was developing, when it was starting? Because depression doesn't just snap when a baby's born, right? The
Mm.
brain's That's not how mental illness works, right? It doesn't just snap, right? It leads up to that point of that spiral down, right? And then they're like, okay, well, watch out for these signs and symptoms. You probably already had those signs and symptoms, but you weren't talked to about them before. You just ignored them because you thought it was just, and you were told, okay, don't stress out for the baby, don't think about that, don't go down that. So you're just kind of ignoring these other feelings, right? because you don't want to do anything to your body, you don't want to do anything to the baby, things like that. And it's the same for dads, like especially first time fathers. I think back to my first kid, it's like I had so many feelings. I had so many things going through my head. I had so many things just in my head all the time. Like, holy crap, this is a lot. I'm overwhelmed. I'm sad. I'm depressed. I was 20 years old, 21 years old. It's like I'm losing out on my 20s. Well, not losing out because it was my choice, right? I was married. I wanted to have kids, things like that. And so it's like, but it's like, man, I'm losing out on this. I'm losing out on this. I'm losing out on that. Like, I'm not going to be able to hang out with friends. I'm not going to be able to do this. Blah 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 blah. And so that all piled up and piled up and piled up, and then I was more reactive and things like that. It definitely didn't help any underlying mental illness I already had. It didn't help anything I was already had diagnosed, right? But it's the same for a mother. If those feelings don't just start in month 8, month 9 kind of things, right? Those feelings were there the whole time, but they were ignored, they were shoved down because she's told, at least in my experience and talking to these different women and whatnot, it's like, oh, well, just ignore them because you don't want to stress out the baby. You can't stress out the baby. Those feelings are bad for the baby. So the mother's just like, okay, so why aren't we preventing some of this maternal mental health? Why aren't we preventing this drastic, like, fall off a cliff of depression and anxiety and, sometimes mania as well postpartum? It doesn't make sense to me. It does not make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. And I think the lack of support for the mothers from like domestic labor standpoint at home, like, is really hard too, right? So you're bringing the baby home and now you're having to think about your meal prep and laundry and keeping the house clean and feeding the baby and getting sleep and all of those things, right? It's so much, and that does not help the mother or the father at that point, right? It's such an overwhelming survival mode time. I know that when my son was born, we didn't have any help from family, and it was just the two of us, and it was just, we were in our own little bubble with the baby, and just, like I said, trying to get through each day on survival mode. And we did, and it was fine. And we did it. And sometimes now I look back, I'm like, oh, that was a nice time because we were in our bubble. But going through it was really hard. Your brain's on fire because of lack of sleep, and it's just like mush. My brain was literally mush.
Yeah. No, I remember I had my second daughter during late 2020. So my second daughter was born during like COVID, and it was weird. It was weird. Like, I remember being in the hospital. I mean, this was literally freaking 5-6 months before my divorce. So our relationship was already on like the very back end when she was born and stuff. But I just remember it being so weird because, like, there were people outside our hospital room window, like outside, and it was so weird, like,
That's
trying to
weird.
talk to them. And it
Yeah.
was so isolated, and it was like we had people like here, but at the same time, like, we had no one at the same time. It was almost like when we literally had no one when my first daughter was born. And now me and my ex-wife were divorced and whatnot, remarried now. So I don't want to talk too much or reminisce or anything like that because it's not worth my time. It's not worth my energy or effort. But, it's different. And it's, I got to think about the moms like currently who were had babies during COVID, because it was such a isolating time. And mental health was at an all-time worst. you
Mm.
know
Mm-hmm.
I still have yet to see like true statistics about, because we haven't been given those statistics yet. They're still out there somewhere. They don't want to be uncovered. They're probably
Chat
being
GPT.
manipulated,
Go ask Chat GPT.
right? But like, I would really want to know like how COVID affected. And there's some studies out there. There's not a lot, but like, what were the rates of people's like depression, anxiety, other mental illnesses shooting up during COVID? What about for mothers who were literally stuck inside being pregnant? So they just, all they had was time to think. And I really want to know how many of those mothers who gave birth during COVID have suffered an episode of like mania or manic depression or manic anxiety or something post having that baby and during COVID, because these signs symptoms were prevalent. I would almost think, I would like to think, and well, I don't want this to happen. I want this to be true, but I would think like these numbers are pretty abnormally high, right? Higher than they probably should be. So that's a big problem here when it comes to maternal and just paternal mental health in general, is that there's no preventative system in place. There's no prevention in place unless the mother, for some reason, is already seeing someone. But that's one in however many, probably like 1 in 1,000 maybe, right? But then you think about fathers, that's probably 1 in 100,000 that maybe are actually seeing someone for mental health treatment during pregnancy or whatnot. That's There's a big gap there. And then we're supposed to be raising children. Raising children is a huge responsibility. If you don't have your mental health together, then phew, oh man, it's gonna be harder. And then all this kind of conversation all comes back to what we've been talking about this whole time. We're raising children who are little jerks and who have no empathy, who can't think for themselves, who are just out there, and it all comes full circle, right? So
yes, it's all interrelated. It really is. You can't say that it's not when it comes from, regulation of your emotions, regulation of your words, all of those things. It all comes together. It's all intertwined.
Yeah. I mean, because it starts at home. It starts at home. We like to think, a lot of parents think that, okay, well, they're going to learn that stuff at school. They're going to learn that from socializing. Well, they're at school for 8 months of the year, for 8 hours a day. Where are they at for the other 16 hours of every day? Most likely they're at home, eating, sleeping, pooping, crying, all the things.
Yep.
Right.
Just
and who are they
hanging
with?
out. Yes.
Yeah. And who are they hanging out with?
Right. Exactly.
So what example are they learning? What example are you setting? That's the most important thing to remember. Like, you model the behaviors. You model language skills. You model emotional regulation skills. You model emotional identification skills. You model empathy. There's a lot of responsibility. But if you're unable to do that because for whatever reason, maybe you have a mental illness preventing you from doing so, that's not being treated. If you have just something in the way that's blocking you from being that best possible self, then the best time was to start was yesterday. The second best time to start is today. So it's time to start today and to start essentially getting your shit together.
Yeah.
Because
your
kids
said.
depend on it. Yeah. Because your kids depend on it. Your partner depends on it. If you're with somebody and you're married and you're with the mother, father of your child, and they depend on it. Your friends and family depend on it. Your job depends on it. And essentially, the future of our society depends on it as well.
Very much so. It really does. It's one of those things that heading into parenting, I did not know how important that was until we were in it. Does that make sense? Like, you go to the parenting classes and they're like, this is how you feed your baby. This is how you bathe your baby. This is how you put on a diaper. All of those, again, sort of survival skill things. But in those birthing classes or in those intro to parenting classes, they're not talking about emotional regulation. They're not talking about getting your S together so that you're not passing on generational trauma to your kids that your dad passed on to you and then you're passing on there, right? Like, I didn't realize about that until now. I work in this industry, the parenting industry, talking about parenting. It's what I do all the time, right? And so I'm very aware about all of this. But I think going back to what you were saying, Jay, is like that should be really at the forefront of the conversation for parenting, is sorting your own stuff out so that you could be a better parent.
100%. Because I love that you mentioned like the generational piece of this, because there's a big generational piece of this. Like, whether you and your husband know it or not, some of those links got passed down to your son because they just did, right? The links through you as a mother got passed down to your son, whether you know it, they were being linked or not, because they got passed on through genetics. Same from your parents to you, to your husband, and now into your son. Those things were just linked there, right? And sometimes we don't know that they're even happening and that they're being linked. Sometimes we don't understand where they're coming from because we're not taking the time to understand where they're coming from. So yes, those parenting classes are great. I don't remember ever being like told to take one or given one or anything like that. That was
For
back
my
in
son, I think we had
20.
to do it at the hospital. They offered it at the hospital where we had my son, and it was a one afternoon. I think it might have been like 2 or 3 hours, and they literally just taught us how to like hold a baby and put on a diaper.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I feel like most people know how to hold a baby. At some point, they learn how to hold a baby before that, but not everyone. So it is a good skill to have, and learn how to change a diaper is important. But changing a baby boy's diaper versus changing a baby girl's diaper, very different. Um, you got to be a lot quicker when changing that baby boy than you are changing that baby girl.
It's true.
Um, that's a fact. And they don't tell you all the lovely things that can happen during diaper change. Um,
It's a
and then they're
mess.
not going to tell you, okay, you may have just changed a diaper, but in 5 minutes you're going to have to change it again because you changed it at the wrong time. And now you're going through 3 diapers versus 2 diapers, and you just use half a pack of wipes. So sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
And you're
but
going to
those
need to
are,
take out a mortgage on all those diaper wipes and diapers.
yeah,
So
yeah,
expensive.
for real. And they're not going to tell you, well, the zeros are only going to fit for 2 weeks after birth, and then the ones are going to fit for the next 2 weeks, and then the twos are going to fit for the next 3 months, and then the threes are going to fit for the next 6 months, and then the fours are going to fit for the next year after that. So, you know,
Yeah.
buy them wisely, but also remember that you need nighttime diapers because nighttime diapers, hopefully, they're sleeping more. And when they start sleeping on their own, they're going to need a bigger diaper that's more absorbent, or you're going to be changing a baby, changing clothes, changing sheets, and going through this runaround every day.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't tell you all these things, right? And you don't know until you know, or you talk to somebody that knows, right? And
And
so
that's
it
why
can
you're
be just,
here.
yeah, that's why we're here, right? To talk about this. Believe it or not, we talk about parenting stuff all day, and constantly throughout our weeks and things like that. Believe it or not, Modern Mom Problems podcast and Young Dad podcast, we talk about parenting stuff. Believe it or not. Um, if they don't believe it, hopefully they do by now at the
I
end of this
hope so. We've
episode.
been,
But
yeah, I was going to say, we've been doing it for 57 minutes, guys. Believe it. We know the stuff.
believe it, right? Um, but yeah, so it's, it all comes back, it's all connected. And those classes are great if they're available, but you got to get yourself together. You got to get yourself
Yeah.
together. You got to get yourself together. You got to get it
Yeah.
together.
That is my number one parenting advice. Forget about the diapers and getting the right sizes. I mean, yes, that's important. So you're not cleaning poop off the wall, but get your stuff in order is like number one when it comes to parenting. You got to get your S together. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear,
Yeah,
so I won't. You just got to
you,
get your
you
S
honey, you
together.
can. Yeah, but I mean, and that's not all your stuff. You don't have to have everything together. You don't have to be the
No,
perfect
no, it's
person
not
to
like
have
you're
a child.
like flicking a switch and all of a sudden you're like, perfect role model number one. Like that's just not the case, but you have to do sort of some of that heavier internal work to
Hmm.
shed, like going back to what I said before about the generational traumas, the hitting, the yelling, demeaning, all the things that you used to see. I mean, maybe not in your family, but the things that many people see
Oh no, I
in
saw
their
him in my
families
family, 100%.
historically, right? That like this stops with me. This stops right here. I'm not going to do those same behaviors.
Yeah, because the goal at the end of the day, when my children leave the house for me, is that I can look back and say, and I can look at those children as they leave on their way to go out into the big, big, scary world. I know that they're going to be free thinkers. They're going to be creative. I know that they're good people. I know that they're leaving home with a foundation that is unshakable. And that foundation is in faith, in family, in love, in empathy, that they have a relationship with their Savior, Jesus, and that they know where they stand on key issues, and they're able to stand up for what they feel is right versus
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to fall for the stupid crap of the world. They're going to be able to stand up for their rights, and they're going to stand for what they believe in, no matter what circumstance, and they're going to feel empowered to do so. And they're not going to take nobody's shit. They ain't going to take no man shit. That's for sure. Um, because if they just put up with my shit for the last 18, 20 years, right? They can put up with me for the last 18, 20 years. Shit, everyone else is going to be a cakewalk, right? But if they can learn to stand up to me respectfully and they're not going to take my shit, then because I have some non-negotiables in my house that we don't do. There's a no non-negotiable when it comes to you don't yell at me, I'm not going to yell at you. You scream at me, I'm not going to scream at you. You don't talk back to me, you're not going to get talked back to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we try to do more co-regulation, things like that together, more
Mm-hmm.
conversations. I'm like, go to your room. Oh, go to your room. I'll be in there in a minute, kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. You don't fight back. I ask you to do something, you do it the first time I
Mm-hmm.
ask you. Very simple non-negotiables, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very
Mm-hmm.
simple.
Yeah.
Those are just my non-negotiables. Some parents will hear that and be like, "Well, you're a hard ass." No, I these are simple non-negotiables, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
to treat people kindly. Like I'm not yelling at them, you're not going to yell at me.
Yep.
I'm not going to hit you, you're not going to hit me.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to disrespect me, I'm not going to disrespect you. It's very common things, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just how we should be as people.
That's the thing.
You
'Cause
make a mess, you
what
clean it up. You're accountable
exactly?
for yourself. You're
Exactly.
accountable. Like it's accountability.
That's exactly what it comes down to. So whether they're 7 years old or 27 years old, you know what? You have to treat people with respect, right? So you're going to treat a peer with respect. You're going to treat your child with respect. And then everyone's going to grow up, like you said, have accountability. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, have courtesy and care about
Hmm.
each other out on when we're driving on the road or whether
Hmm.
we're in our own kitchen after we spill some mac and cheese, right? We're all going to try to take care of each other.
Yeah, my kids are going to be the kids that the people in the car that when someone lets you merge over on a busy traffic, they're going to be the kids that raise their hand and give a little wave in the rear view
Yes,
as a little thank you
that's
kind of
all.
thing.
That's all I'm asking. I'm just asking for like a little wave because that's what I do. And I don't know why people don't do it. And everyone's
It
driving,
just
95
yeah, it
miles an
just
hour and not letting each other merge. I just don't get it.
yeah, no, it's like I don't understand why. Well, it's because we're in this hustle culture, right? We're in
That's
hurry
what it is.
culture. We're in a hurry mode all the time. We're just like, we got to get there, we got to get there, we got to get there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hurrying and we're both going to relatively the same place, and I see you and we're going to relatively the same area, and I'm like a minute behind you, it's like,
Yes,
come on.
that's what's so silly. It happens in my own town, and everyone's trying to like beat each other to the next street light, or like like the next traffic light. It just doesn't make sense. You're like, where are we going? We're all right here in the same in the same little
Yeah.
town. It doesn't make sense. I don't
And
know.
you look over and you see the person that's in the car next to you, you know them, and you know that they're going to the store, and you're going to the store, and they're trying to beat you to the store. So when you see them at the store, you're like, really? Come on. Come on. Kind of
It's
thing.
true.
So,
It doesn't have to be like that.
no, it doesn't. Shouldn't be like that, but that's where we're at. So, all right. Any last thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, listen to my podcast, Modern Mom Probs. I have all kinds of fun people on there. I have medical professionals. Occasionally, I'll have celebrities. I'll have real parents. It really runs the gamut of guests and just talking about different modern mom problems. And yeah, follow me on Instagram. The account is Modern Mom Probs, and that's my stuff. I'm big into
Perfect.
branding, so all the things are Modern Mom Probs. You'd be able to find me.
I love it. All right. Well, before we're gonna wrap up real quick, I have one like last closing question or so before we wrap
Yeah,
up here.
go
Just
for it.
bear with me. I'm just gonna close this out real quick. So these beats that you hear at the beginning and end of the podcast, this is the trap swerve beat from the Podbeat app. Podbeat, what it does is it takes your podcast and it turns it into a musical experience. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I love Podbeat. I use Podbeat when I'm at the gym. Maybe I'm out for a stroll, walking around the neighborhood, and I just need a little beat to get me through. Podbeat is great because you can overlay your podcast right now. Like you hear how I'm talking, I have the beat kind of lower volume so you can still kind of hear me. But if I really need to crank it up, I'm at the gym and I need to turn out the noise, turn it up. You can still kind of hear me. It's a little distracting, but you can still hear me. You really get into that beat. It goes on a 3-minute loop so that you can hear me, so that you can keep loops in 3 minutes because there's something about the brain and beats and rhythm and things like that. Listen to the episode coming out with Nate and Joy from the Podbeat app, or that came out already from the Podbeat app, and you'll be able to understand why they do a whole 3-minute loop kind of thing. It's a whole rhythm thing. But Podbeat, great friends of the podcast. I love that they let me use their beats to help promote them and to add a little bit of extra flavor and zest to the show. Additionally, I love my other partners, the podcast as well. Love, love, love. Like I mentioned at the top of the show here, Four Fathers Apparel, the best dad polos in the game, the best dad apparel out there. Second to none is Dad Bod Apparel itself with the hats, the gear, the shirts, support your local girl dad, all the things like that. And then after that, the June app, my favorite app if you have children that struggle with habits, behaviors, routines, anything like that. June, Joon, that's the app you need. That's the app that will change the game for you. I promise you, I'm telling you. Families, I recommend it to families in work, my 9 to 5 that I do every day, and I recommend it to friends as well. And I use it here at home as well. It's a great way to get kids engaged and doing tasks and chores and things like that. Get them involved at home. So, and then of course you can also check out my man, Dr. Harold, as well. That's also in that link tree in the description. He offers coaching through the podcast. He's my personal coach, so he's one that I personally endorse. If you're trying to get on that fitness, trying to get that health right, trying to get that body right, because strength training is important. It's important for you to be able to, live and move and to extend your longevity. So you don't want to be the old man that can't get up from his chair after doing a podcast episode. So trust me, been there, done that because of hip injuries. But thank you for listening through the closing there, Tara. So last question here.
Yeah.
The question I love to end with, it's kind of my signature question, right? Some podcast hosts will ask their signature question at the start.
Mhm.
I like to save mine for the very end. The very end, make the listener really wait for it. Wait for that like best golden nugget. The closing question here is: let's say a young, and we're talking young mother here, 19 to 20, 24, super young, super
Mhm.
young. Just had her first kid.
Mhm.
She comes to you. She knows you and she comes to you. She's like, she can't even get the words out. You can just see that she's scared, she's nervous, she's anxious, and she's just all the things, right? Of a first time young mother, but she's so young, right? She's nervous, she's scared. Let's just say her husband comes to me, I talk to him, or he goes to your husband, and let's say me and your husband are hanging out. We take him for a boys' thing. You guys hang out. What kind of advice are you giving to that young mother? Maybe one or two pieces of like advice to her.
The first piece of advice I would say is let go of any of society's expectations of you and just do what you think is right for your family and follow your gut. And don't think of the things that you think you should be doing because social media told you, or that you should be trying to sleep train or trying to do this or trying to do that. Like, you can consider those as like suggestions, but they're not do or die. I mean, for the most part, things. So going back to what you were saying earlier, is like educate yourself on the things that you should be doing as a parent, whether it's whether it's feeding or diapering or sleeping or however you want to come up with that. But don't think that you have to be doing all the different things. So get rid of the shoulds. Stop shoulding yourself. So don't say I should be doing this and I should be doing this and
I
I should be doing
hate
this.
shitting myself. I should myself so much. It's
Same.
messy.
It's so messy. So I would say stop shitting yourself. That's my number one thing, because it's hard. It's really it's harder said than done to when you're
Mhm.
in that place. And then two, my next thing would be try to build your village, whether it's with your family, your friends. Sometimes nowadays we have to pay for our village, and what I mean by that is daycare or a babysitter or whatever it is to make your life a little bit easier in your parenting journey. So those would be my two things: would be stop shooting yourself, get rid of those society expectations, and focus on building your village, whatever that looks like for you.
Man, that's killer right there. I love that. I can't speak enough to how important both those things are because there's always going to be the shoulds. There's always going to be the shoulda, woulda, couldas,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then the shoulda, woulda, couldas just lead you to adjustments, right? They just
Yeah.
lead you to adjusting later. But it's so easy to get caught up in all those expectations from mothers and fathers alike, right?
Mm-hmm.
The shoulds.
Yeah.
Well, the more you should yourself, the more you're going to have a pants full of shoulds, and you really need to go take a shower to rinse that off because you have that should stank, right? Because people can look at you and see like just how much baggage you're carrying
Yeah.
around, and that baggage isn't healthy, and your kids are going to see it. Your kids are going to feel that,
Yep.
and let go of it.
Yep. Let go of
One
it.
thing for me in my faith and whatnot, like all those shoulds were already paid for. All those shoulds were already carried. All that baggage is already carried for you. So let let the creator, let the savior carry that for you as they already want to. They already did. You don't got to be carrying it. You don't got to keep carrying it. So that's my piece there. So yeah, your shoulds, yes, they're always going to be there, but they don't have to be as heavy as you're making them. Let
Mm-hmm.
them go, and because they've already been paid for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then the second thing, find your village, find your people, find people who you can be around, find people who you can
Mm-hmm.
hang out with, even if it's like one other friend or like two other
Yeah.
really close friends. Like for me, I like a small circle, and I have like a very small circle, but my small circle, man, is my small circle like always there for me? Like, man, are they always there for me? I just officiated my best friend's wedding. They had already like
Very
married on
cool.
the side and whatnot, but I was just there like informal, efficient, right? Um, on the wedding day, just kind of making a show for everyone that was there. And, they're like my best friends. When I ask them if I need something, it's just like, hey, can you pick up, because our daughters go to the same school. And I'm like, hey, can you pick up so and so? Can you pick up my daughter from school today? Oh, yeah, no, I got you, no problem. And they're same to me, hey, can you pick up the girls and drop them off at the house for me? Yeah, no, I got you, no problem. Kind of thing. Oh, hey, we're doing this weekend. Do y'all want to come? Yeah, I would love to, kind of thing. Or hey, we haven't seen you guys in a couple weeks. Come over, hang out, kind of thing. Like that's what it's about, right? No matter how big or no matter how small, like your people are your people and they're always going to be there. Your people are going to be there for you. So find your people wherever you got to find them and develop those relationships, cultivate them, put the time and energy into them, because that time and energy that you put in is going to come back and benefit you way more than you ever thought it could. So with that, all the people can find you again, like you mentioned, modern mon probs, and that's
Mm-hmm.
across all the social medias, all the
Yep.
social media spaces.
Yep.
The podcast itself. Are you also on YouTube?
Yes, but I'm so lazy over there. So like Spotify, I guess automatically puts my episodes up on YouTube, so they're there.
Okay,
So yes, yes, kind
gotcha,
of. To answer your question, actually, in the fall, I'm
gotcha.
going to make a more concerted effort to like properly flesh out my YouTube channel. That's actually my fall project.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look forward to that. And again, it's Modern Mom Probs,
Yep.
MODERN MOMPROBS, on all the social medias, everywhere you get your podcast, everywhere you get your social media as well. And then, of course, make sure you do the things to support both the podcasts, Young Dad Podcast and Tara's Podcast, by whatever platform you're listening on. Go and give 5 stars, leave a review, subscribe, follow all the things on all the social medias. Do the things to show your love for the podcast. And of course, the full transcription of this episode can be found on my website, ballboymedia.com. And you just have to go. It'll be right there on the homepage. You can find it full transcription if you need that, or if you need to share it with a friend. It's there as well. It's always available for every episode I do. And yeah, I think that's everything.
It's
And I'll catch
awesome.
you next time right here on the podcast.